So let's get to this piece on Venezuela. Now, we brought you the news the other day, which I thought was quite noteworthy, that we actually had this prisoner exchange, which was, it was some of our oil executives and it was some of Maduro's actually like relatives. Mm-hmm. So this seemed pretty noteworthy and a step forward in the relationship. We wondered if it had further significance. Apparently it did. Let's put this up on the screen from the Wall Street Journal. U.S. looks to ease Venezuela's sanctions, enabling Chevron to pump oil. The proposed deal would require Caracas to open talks with political opponents with the aim of free elections in 2024. Let me read you a little bit of this. They say, in exchange for the significant sanctions relief, the government of Venezuela and President Nicolas Maduro would resume long-suspended talks with the country's opposition to discuss conditions needed to hold free and fair presidential elections in 2024. People with knowledge said the U.S. Venezuela's government and some Venezuelan opposition figures have also worked on a deal that would free up hundreds of millions of dollars in Venezuelan state funds frozen in American banks to pay for imports of food, medicine, and equipment for the country's battered electricity grid and municipal water systems. Any shift in U.S. policy that brings back Western oil companies would send a psychological signal to the market that more supply is on the way, one analyst said. So I think some of the wording here is really important because I saw a headline that was like, sanctions relief in exchange for free and fair elections. And I was like, I can't imagine that free and fair elections are actually going to happen here. Nor do I think, we're not demanding the Saudis have free and fair elections now, are we? So it's not like this is an even-handed approach. But the language here is they're going to reopen talks with the opposition. So that to me seems like there's a significant distinction between, all right, we just have to reopen the talks and we're actually going to have free and fair elections. We've been long advocating here they should do this deal. It has limitations in terms of what it will actually do in terms of oil supply. The infrastructure here is sort of decayed and degraded. The amount of oil that would actually come on the market is somewhat in doubt. But what they're pointing to is the fact that, and this is really important to keep in mind with regard to the oil market and all kinds of commodity markets, that it's not just this basic economics, oh, here's the supply and here's the demand and that's the price. The price is really determined based on what speculators think that the price is going to be, and even beyond that, what speculators think other speculators are going to think the price is going to be.
Yes.
And so that's why even something like this, when they talk about a psychological signal, and a lot of this is algorithmically driven too, it's not even like human beings thinking about this, there's an anticipation that it will have some sort of impact on other speculators. So there are bets put in that regard that can help ease the pressure on prices ultimately. So that's what they're looking at here.
Yeah, I think it's look, as you said, which is that the idea that we're supposed to buy oil only from good countries is ludicrous. I don't know why a barbarous regime which cuts people's heads off is any better or worse than a communist regime which has ruined a once prosperous country. I don't know. I don't particularly care. I just want some oil. That's cheap. And beyond that, I want to get to a place where we don't have to buy oil from any of these places just so we never have to be put in this position. But if we're going to have so much hypocrisy in our oil markets and more, we might as well just say, hey, we'll buy it from anybody. We've got an enemy over here. We might as well buy some Venezuelan oil. The fact that it took so long is also just so absurd and just shows you why the U.S. political system is so rotted with brainworms. Nobody squeaks a word when MBS is what he is, and we buy oil from him. But, buying oil from Venezuela is like the most objectionable thing on the planet.
I also do want to say, like, the sanctions that the Trump administration imposed have been brutally devastating for the human beings who live in Venezuela. The economy was already, for a variety of reasons, and in particular the fact that that oil prices had gone down so significantly during COVID, which meant that, the money that the Venezuelan government really relies on sort of dried up. And then they're hit with sanctions on top of that. And that just caused really total economic collapse. And not without, even if you're like, well, I don't give a shit about them, it's not us. It has a lot of domestic political reverberations here as well, because obviously we've seen a huge flood of migrants coming from Venezuela because of that economic fallout. So in my opinion, even, beyond the oil situation, which is obviously significant in terms of gas prices you pay at the pump, there is a real humanitarian justification for finding ways to ease these sanctions, which have been absolutely devastatingly brutal on those populations. Also sort of help kind of destabilize some of the surrounding countries there as well.
Look, I hope it moves speedily and it actually gets going. I think it'd probably be good for everybody if that were to be the case. Will Washington sabotage it? Probably, honestly. Like, we're at a decent place, but as you said on infrastructure, there's a long way to go before any oil actually starts shipping out of that country. You know, even for Chevron to resume drilling operations and more, you know, we've talked about how refinery capacity is low, how actually Venezuelan oil is difficult to refine. This stuff takes years and years to build, so we're not out of the woods in any way. But this is the type of creative diplomacy which I still will support from the Biden administration.
I mean, even if you're just looking at purely our interests, do the deal with them, do the deal with Iran, say fuck you to the Saudis, and that's, to me, the clear path forward right now. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.